Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. We'll just let people trickle in. Today's topic is going to be 2025 best practices for mobile pipeline and testing. And we have a couple of awesome guests who are going to have a chat about all things testing and what teams can do to make their lives easier. So we'll kick things off. If you have questions or comments, thoughts you want to share with the panel, we have a Q&A and a chat function, so please just pop that open, say hello, let us know where you're joining from, and we'll earmark some questions to answer towards the end when we get to that section. A recording of this session will be shared immediately after via email, so keep an eye on your inbox, and if you miss anything scintillating that Daniel or Akhil share, it will be sent to you immediately afterwards so that you can catch up after the fact. So today, joining me, I'm Jess Thompson, your host for today from Bitrise, and joining me is Daniel Balla, who is our Chief Strategy Officer here at Bitrise, and Akhil Gundawar, who is Director of Product Management at BrowserStack. We've got an awesome panel here, some great questions lined up for them. So before we kick off into those questions, just a small reminder, in case you haven't seen this, that we announced a partnership between our two brands in January of this year. The link to where you can read more about that is going to be dropped in the chat for you. Essentially, in addition to this joint mission that we have to improve mobile experience for development teams like yourselves who are trying to improve mobile experience, you can also claim a free product offer. So if you are a BrowserStack customer, you can claim free Bitrise credits. If you are a Bitrise customer, you can claim a free upgrade for Automate's cloud device plan. So definitely bookmark that for later and go and check out what's available to you. Could not be more excited to be working together. This is the first webinar that we've done together, one of many. So what are we here for? We're talking about pipelines, we're talking about testing, we're talking about releases. So let's look at a perfect release cycle. And for those of you who are new to the Bitrise brand, this is Bitbot and this is per request, which is why this is cat themed. So what does a perfect release cycle look like? You start to write an enormous piece of functionality, biting off more than you can chew. Nobody is available to review it, and everybody knows testing is for the weak. So you complete that functionality, you let it sit for 2 weeks whilst you work on something else enormous. It gets unit tested at the last possible second. You manually fold that into main. You dive through some swords. Maybe a boulder is running behind you as you run a gauntlet to get it out to internal testers on, the hour before it's going out, maybe. And this is fine. This is fine. This is fine. So we know what perfect doesn't look like, right? So what is it that actually truly gets in the way of best practice with what we're talking about today? It's things like manual release processes, manual testing integration, poor device coverage for testing, network and service interruptions, and dev cycles just generally running too long. And the problem with what we're facing is that all of this is more difficult for mobile. And what makes it more difficult for mobile is more control on limitations, higher stakes for mobile releases. Once you have pushed that, there's no calling it back. More complex testing requirements, which we'll go into in great detail shortly, frequently changing ecosystems, whether you're working with iOS or Android or both. And generally, there is less guidance on what best practice should look like or could look like. And that is why we're here today. So I'm going to stop this screen share and Dan, Akhil, let's chat. So we've talked about why mobile development is that much trickier. What about testing specific to mobile?
Yeah. So hey everyone. The things that I can see from Bitrise side, from our customers are, and I'm sure Akhil can go into a lot more detail about device testing challenges, but obviously from an Android perspective, while you have a much more flexible build tool, when you want to do UI testing, you're stuck with Android emulators, which can be notoriously unreliable especially in a virtualized environment, because you don't have nested virtualization, or it's very challenging to make that happen. You have your usual problems with Xcode because everything is generally just a pain with that. So generally, that flakiness is what I see taking up developers' time a lot. And then, of course, when you are developing for mobile, you want to share that app with your testers or whoever in your company or your mom, and that's also sometimes very difficult, especially again on iOS. You have to do code signing, but even on Android, which can be quite tricky. It's a bit more complex than just sharing a link for a review environment or staging environment, like you are used to in the web world. So I also see that being a huge hurdle, especially for smaller teams starting up, but also from large organizations that have a very complex like deployment requirements and pipeline. Orchestrating that across the different stakeholders can be a big challenge. Akhil, what do you think?
Yeah, true to that, Daniel. And thanks, Jess, for setting up the context, right? I think the mobile world is very different to how desktop world operates, right? And we all know why user experience is the key for application success, right? Having the right workflows, having right parameters to ensure all of the workflows are working fine is very critical for application success, right? Desktop is more standardized, right? Set of browsers, less of interruption, right? Mobile gets used a lot for way different things apart from the app under test or the application right now on the screen, right? There are a lot of things moving on the mobile application, like lock screen, your calls and network related changes. There are a lot which is happening on the mobile app as well, and there's a fragmentation there as well, right? You mentioned about emulators, you mentioned about iOS and Android challenges, but we have different OEMs, we have different size of devices as well. The tablets are there, iPads are there, the phones are there, right? Different sizes, right? There's a lot of fragmentation when it comes to mobile ecosystem, right? And that requires a rigorous testing to ensure that the overall experience is intact, and that's why the mobile side of things is much more trickier, much more nuanced compared to how the desktop side of things operates. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, very true and painfully felt, I think, by the people in the room. So, thinking about these challenges, what can mobile development teams actually do to overcome some of this? Like, Akhil, do you want to kick us off with this one?
Yeah, sure, Jess. So thing is, we need to have a right test prioritization metric, right? We need to ensure that the right workflows are getting automated, the right workflows are covered as part of the testing workflows, right? We need to understand where does your app gets used. Maybe look into your analytics to understand the demographics of your apps, where it is getting used, what type of devices, or the form factors where it is getting used, and what are the critical workflows that gets used, right? I think that is much more critical to understand of what needs to get tested, right? Once you have the clarity on what are the workflows that needs to get tested, you need to understand what forms of testing also needs to be done, right? There are different forms of testing as well. You should park some amount of testing as part of unit testing, where you independently test your code or the individual components, and then start driving towards the UI testing, right, where you test out all the end-to-end workflows, right? Once you have that workflow set, trying to find out the right framework which you would be using it to for test. Daniel did mention about emulators, simulators, the requirements of real device testing, right? You need to figure out what needs to be tested on emulators, what needs to be tested on real devices, right? That is very key to understand what kind of framework or what kind of automation you want to set up for your mobile testing space, right? There are different forms of testing as well, right? Now there are mobile phones with curvy screens, without curved screens. There are fold devices. There are different forms of layouts that the mobile or OEM providers are doing, right? Samsung has its own UI, Xiaomi has its own challenges around the hardware. So a lot of things you need to define on what you need to test as well. You need to ensure that app is accessible as well. You need to ensure that app is performant as well, right? So you need to figure out, once the workflows are set up, once the types of testing is set up, that what you want to test, maybe start figuring out what forms of accessibility testing you want to do, or what type of component or what type of UI testing you should be doing, right? That is very much more critical for you to figure out, right? You don't have to test out the application or your mobile apps on all the device combination, but you need to figure out what is the right set of combination where your customers lie, and start defining a testing strategy for your mobile application. That is early thoughts. Daniel, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that, and I think it was a pretty comprehensive description from an overall automation and pipeline perspective. What I see a lot of teams fall into are a couple of things. One is, yes, you have flakiness, but a lot of times developers, because they have a lot of stuff to do, they just turn off the flaky test that, oh, I'm going to fix it later, but then it never gets fixed. I'm sure you all can relate to that, or it happened to you once or twice. And I see teams kind of upping the quality bar when they actually start taking these things seriously and start assigning those turn off flaky tests to specific people, or having a process like, yes, turning it off, quarantining it, but also having a plan of what to do with that, or implementing smart retries, so that you're not basically stuck in that state before turning those tests off just because they're flaky. But also on the deployment side, for example, with Bitrise, we experienced the same thing back when we started, that the code signing was pretty difficult. So we have integrated with, now that Apple has an API, we have integrated with that, and we always try to find ways to automate the code signing aspect, and also create like a more robust and more transparent release process that is more transparent for folks to move through and approve at the right states, and always know what's happening and when. And also, what I see is a lot of teams kind of don't want to spend time or resources just testing increments, and they start testing big changes. And as kind of Jess talked about it in the perfect release part, that's when you're going to be basically in release hell, because it's going to be incredibly difficult to figure out what went wrong. And the more complex code you write, the harder it will be. So even though it's a bit of an extra resource or time, it's very important to have it in your testing strategy, that incremental testing, even on feature branches, or at least on some in between states, so that you can act very early. And that's where these kind of weekly or bi-weekly release trains can work, because that's what I see everyone striving for, at least bi-weekly, which means every 2 weeks, not twice every week. Release trains can achieve, because then developers can actually act quickly on bugs and issues, and when the train leaves, they can actually put some functionality on that.
If we've done nothing but define what biweekly is, and we can agree on that once and for all as a collective, then this webinar is a huge success.
It
So
can be very confusing sometimes. I fell into this trap a couple of times.
absolutely. So looking at some of the poll kind of responses that we're getting here, we've kind of got a bit of a mixed audience in terms of the experience. So can we just do a little bit of a recap in terms of like unit testing, integration testing, device testing? Like, when would you recommend doing each, and like how much do you think that we can automate in these spaces? Akhil, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I think for me, the best strategy is the test pyramid. We should start defining different layers as part of unit testing, component testing, and maybe UI testing on the integration side, right? The end-to-end workflows, right? Unit testing is usually where you want to test out the individual code pieces separately or independently, right? The component testing or integration testing comes in, where you start picking up or start integrating multiple components together with each other, right? I think that is where the component testing will fall in, and then top of the pyramid is around end-to-end automation, right? Daniel, you did brought in the topic of overall automation. We do believe, at least in BrowserStack, don't repeat yourself at your work. Now, it is part of your testing cycle. It is part of your product workflows. Anything, do it only once, right? That is where we believe as a culture on how do you start automating things about it, right? You need to ensure that you are supporting the release cycles of the business and the customer deliverables, right? So that is where it is important to split your testing strategy into unit testing, component testing, and then overall end-to-end automation, right? You don't have to do everything end-to-end automation, right? You should start splitting into different layers, right? So unit testing is the best form because it will give you the best results and the fastest results out there, right? So you should try for 100% automation of the code coverages and everything, right? So then starts into component testing or integration testing, where you start figuring out all of your critical workflows, critical components that would have a high risk radius to break, right? So that is where I would start prioritizing some of the test cases, some of the integration related test cases, right? And then end to end test case, which is again critical from a user point of view, critical from a business delivery point of view, right? It could be your login flows, sign up flows, and everything, right? Where you would want to ensure that everything is intact from get go. Users open the application till he or she completes the workflow, right? It is important that that particular thing gets automated, right? Again, you need to ensure as part of automation that you are enabling lot more of feature deliverables, so lot more of faster cycle times, right? We'll talk about metrics as well, but ensuring the same steps are not performed again and again should be your critical metric to track as part of your automation. And that is how I would prioritize my test cases to get automated. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe one more thing to add here is that I can see more and more. Obviously, this is more of an advanced use case, but I see more and more teams starting to look into test distribution and more especially test avoidance. So, with the help of build and test caching, you can basically only test what actually changed and avoid the tests that don't have to run, and avoid rebuilding what doesn't have to be rebuilt. That actually eliminates a lot of complexity down the line, while you have some upfront cost to implement more modular setup in your code base, especially if you're talking about like Bazel. But with Gradle, it's a bit more easy. Then you can end up in a state where you can really focus in on what really needs to be tested, and that actually gives you back a lot of time and gives you a bit more confidence as well to iterate. So maybe that's probably by the top of the pyramid. Just wanted to put that out there as well, something to consider.
It's really great, really helpful insight. We've obviously just talked a little bit about priority with that kind of approach and way of thinking of things. But thinking about testing strategies to accelerate those successful releases, talking about like coverage here. So what advice would you give to teams who are maybe shorter on time but still need to kind of ruthlessly prioritize and set that priority order? Is there any further advice that you would give for teams?
Yeah, definitely. I think we always believed in doing 80% of the work, doing 20% of the work for making use of 80% of the work, right? I think that is what we usually believe in BrowserStack. I would try to prioritize the core functionalities where my business is, where my users are. I will try to use or automate a lot of my core functionalities. Then start looking into the risky workflows as well, right? Which are tend to break. I think what Daniel, you did mention about the newer changes, the newer features, any critical workflows, right? Which has a risk, uh, high risk score, right? That is what I would try to prioritize. Uh, After handling all of my core functionalities and the risk areas, I would try to ensure my user experience is right. My app is working on all the different devices where I am seeing the traffic, all from the scrolling functionalities to handling the interruption testing. I am able to handle my application behavior in different types of network environment, different performance requirement as well. That is where I would try to prioritize rest of my test cases, right? Once I have covered all of my user experience workflows, I might start looking into the security workflows as well, right? Trying to ensure that my data stays intact, there's no leaks happening within the application, within all of my critical workflows, right? That is where I would start looking at it, right? Once the basics things and the most critical things are covered, I will start looking at compatibility testing, whether things work on different form factors, different device layouts, different forms of application, right? There are different functionalities around mobile related to like split screens. There are around digital well-being features as well, which starts affecting your application behavior as well, right? Low battery mode, network mode, like there are a lot of functionalities which the OEMs or the devices or the mobile phones are providing, which starts affecting your mobile application, right? So that would be my next set of things that I want to cover as part of edge cases. So that is how I would try to prioritize my test cases to get automated as well. So
yeah, and I think when it comes to automating all of that, it's important to think about when you do all of these types of testing, or some of these. Maybe you don't want to do all of these at the stage that you're in, and I don't think you have to all the time. But like prioritizing the cheaper, faster tests for when you're iterating, and then as you're getting closer to merge and as you're getting closer to release, you will have different types of testing that you want to run. So the unit test, static analysis, measuring the components code coverage, that kind of stuff obviously can go with your feature branch commits and pushes. But when you're merging, that's when some of those integration tests, end-to-end tests, can start coming in. And one interesting thing that Akhil mentioned about security testing, which is obviously very important. The more regulated area you are in, the more important. What we've seen working really well when it comes to the release process, so releasing to the store, is involving the security team early in that process and making them part of that checklist or that release automation. Is actually making that team more part of your XFN collaboration, instead of being the people who always say no to things. They will start helping you to resolve all of those early on, instead of just coming in late before you want to push the button, and they say no, you can't do that, you have to re-implement something, or something like that, which mostly happens. That can be prevented like that. So I think when you're saying shift left, that is really an important piece of it. It's not just about what type of testing or what kind of processes, but also who you work with, who you involve in the different part of your release or testing process.
Really, really valuable recommendations. Just a reminder from me, so please do drop your questions. We've got a couple already. You have access to Daniel and Akhil's decades of combined mobile expertise for the next 20 minutes or so. So get your questions in, and we'd love to answer some at the end. Okay, so talking about testing, and we mentioned kind of putting stuff in front of others. Let's talk about the effectiveness of measurement. There's lots and lots of noise, lots of very differing opinions on how we should measure testing, how we should report on testing. I would love to hear from each of you guys. So thinking about performance, thinking about functionality, what metrics really matter when it comes to the testing environment? Akhil, do you want to kick us off for this?
yeah, interesting question. Just measure what matters. I think that's the overall theme, right? Daniel did mention about the importance of automation. Why should we automating it, right? I think first and foremost things for me is around improving the cycle time. Why we should doing automation, right? It should enable the business to deliver customer value faster. I think that is where I see cycle time gets translated into the business terms. But it should not block any development teams or release teams from slowing down everything, right? To share the newer features to the customers. I think we need, as an automation, we need to enable all of my release processes to reach out to the customers faster. So the cycle time is the one biggest metric that we measure across our SDLC cycle and then testing cycle as well, right? So that how faster we can reach from how faster we can deliver a feature from an ideation stage to a release stage, right? That is how we try to measure cycle time and BrowserStack. But then there are other forms of metrics as well when it comes to app quality as well. So there are different metrics that we track usually at BrowserStack. So app quality is not only about ensuring the functionality is right? That is one part of it. We need to ensure that the defect leakage is intact. We need to ensure that the right test coverage is getting uh, automated. The critical test cases are getting automated. We need to also measure what is our pass rate as well, right? Like how much testing is done versus how much testing is getting qualified as a successful build, successful test cases, right? That is from a functionality point of view, right? But there is more to the testing. It's more about the app quality. Now, when the apps are shipped, we have Lighthouse as a standardized metric for web applications, right? We don't have so many standards, but apps goes through a lot of processes to reach before it starts reaching out to the customers, right? There are like app store review processes, play store review processes, and there are a lot of restrictions the companies offer before the app gets reached to the customers, right? So there are a lot of performance related metrics, there are a lot of accessibility related metrics that app needs to adhere to before it starts getting shipped to the customers, right? So from a performance point of view, how much what's the size of your applications, right? What is the overall app load time, the startup time? It could be a cold boot up time, warm boot up time. You can start measuring how your app is performing when the customer starts using your application, right? You start looking at the FPS as well, right? You need to ensure that good frame rate is getting delivered so that there's no lag, there's no glitch when the app gets scrolled up, when the app gets used as part of your media or any other use cases, right? There are different type of metrics around the resource utilization as well, right? Now different OEMs have different phones or different tablets which comes with different resource limits, right? So memory usage or CPU usage of application starts defining where does your app gets rate limited, right? Now if things starts getting heated up on from a mobile app point of view, it starts affecting the user experience as well, right? User will never blame the OEM provider. User will always blame the mobile app developers and the mobile app testers, like what's happening, the functionality is wrong, right? The functionality is not right. So that is what the user behavior is, right? And you need to start ensuring that what are the leading metrics to understand what starts affecting your user experience, right? So trying to understand from performance point of view as well, trying to understand from testing coverage point of view, and then having a right set of metrics to ensure that automation is working fine, right? Defect leakage, pass rate, cycle time, those are the few key metrics that we should be tracking it when it comes to mobile releases and automation part of it.
Yeah, on my side, what I always say in these scenarios is that there are two major categories that I think the most important are in mobile development are release frequency and release confidence. Release frequency comes from a lot of the things that Akhil mentioned, measuring cycle time, um, and also implementing automation at the right places, but also and maybe measuring Dora metrics. But measuring all of these things is not the only thing that you need to do. I just want to kind of put this out there. It's a lot of behavioral shift. Just like when we say DevOps as a thing, and then there are DevOps engineers and stuff like this. When this is actually more of a culture, this needs to be a cultural shift in the team, in the organization, on how we approach releases and how we approach testing and how we manage change overall. And measuring these can unlock that, but it cannot be the solutions to it. So these are just a tool in your toolbox to go after. And release confidence comes from you actually knowing from data that what you're about to release is actually going to be high quality. And one of the major things about mobile development compared to web apps is that there is no such thing as a rollback, right? So it's a very, very risky thing to put out a faulty release. So that kind of pre-release testing and everything that leads up to it becomes increasingly more important. And I know we are kind of already going into production and monitoring, But when you do put out inevitably a faulty release, how much time does it take for you to put out a hotfix, and how often do you actually get into that situation? I find high-performing teams measuring that a lot and trying to push down that. It's gonna be your leading indicator to a lot of things. It won't tell you what to do, other than you need to do better in testing. But it can be a really good indicator, even to show your managers that, oh, we need to invest in this more because we're constantly putting out buggy features or things that break. So I need more help, if that should be your blocker.
It's a really interesting point that you raised there in terms of asking for help and more support and more resourcing behind testing so that teams can do this properly when they're already being asked to do so much. So for people in the audience who are already actively trying to convince other stakeholders to invest in testing and tooling and time for managing tests and getting access to real devices to this kind of data, do you have any advice for those people?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely one of the things that, well, I'm a manager, so speaking from experience, if someone comes to me to ask for budget or for time, then I always look for the outcome or the impact that money could make or that time could make, and kind of turning those numbers into how that's going to actually improve the top line, bottom line, whatever that manager cares about in their own area, is something that can really help. So, for example, when we're talking about release frequency or release confidence, release frequency does have a direct impact on user engagement, on ratings, and ultimately how competitive you can be in the app marketplaces. I think we did a couple of reports on this, but I'm sure others have done as well, where we can show that direct connection, and that will mean something to your manager, as well as all the other data or measurements that Akhil and I mentioned about what's happening, what it's causing, actual real life user stories, where they complained about something over and over again, or your NPS. All of that data will be gold dust for when you are asking for budget or for time. And also you can send them this webinar, because obviously that will convince them.
Yeah,
Love
I
it.
think
Awesome.
one of the things that works best, at least at BrowserStack, is customer centricity. What the customer is looking for, what the customer sees value. I think it is easier to get prioritized, irrespective whether it is a bug release or it is a feature release or anything that, as long as it evolves around customer, I think that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about the actual difficulty of device testing itself. So I've seen one of the questions that we have in the chat is kind of related to this topic, and it's something that we hear again and again. Even if teams are working with iOS exclusively, it's still a quite broad range of devices and versions that need to be tested upon. For Android, obviously it offers incredible kind of consumer choice and flexibility, but it pretty much creates a nightmare for developers. How do you go about managing that? How do you decide, what combinations to test on?
Yeah, got it. This is a good question. I think this is the most critical question, because Daniel did mention about, right? You don't have to test everything on everything, right? Then you need to figure out what is the right set of priorities or right set of set of devices or set of frameworks that you should work on, right? I think Android and iOS is one part, but then there are different form factors as well, right? Within Android, every OEM works very differently. Like Samsung's of the world has a very different behavior to Google Pixels of the world, right? Your application starts behaving very weird from OEM to OEM, different sizes and everything, right? I think first thing we should prioritize it. Where are my customers are, right? Where is my mobile application or mobile website is getting used? Try to understand where is my traffic and start prioritizing according to that, right? Maybe there are a bunch of analytics tool which will help you get that information, on the production side, where the apps is getting used most, what are the most used workflows that are getting used within the apps, right? I think once you have that particular data, find out right set of Android versions, or find the right set of phones or tablets where the app is getting used, right? For example, if the application has a reliance on a particular Android API, try to see like it works on Android 10, 12, 14, and then the latest Android versions, right? Try to also ensure that your applications are working on the latest releases of it, right? Because if you have been dealing with the latest updates on iOS, every minor version is breaking the workflows, right? You need to figure out what are the changes which are happening, what does your app rely on from a mobile application point of view, right? Because a lot of mobile applications functionality is linked to the Android APIs or the iOS APIs, right? So once the APIs change, underlying APIs change, it will start affecting your application behavior, and then starts affecting your user experience, right? Try to understand what is getting changed in those APIs, what is getting changed in those versions. Trying to understand where your users are is what I would try to prioritize, and ensure that the right devices are being chosen, uh, and right form factors are chosen to test your applications. Right now, when you see mobile has bunch of functionalities only apart from and not restricted to using the application. Right now, if I open my website in my desktop Mac laptop, everything happens within the Chrome browser. There are very less interruptions happening to the Chrome browser, right? The notifications are not intrusive, the alarms or the behavior of my application does not affect the Chrome browser a lot. It is much more standardized, it is much more streamlined in the desktop side of things, right? But on the mobile side of things, there's a lot of movement and there's a lot of chaos happening in the mobile ecosystem, right? You need to ensure that what are those critical workflows of your mobile application which starts getting affected because of it, right? There are a bunch of shortcuts as well, like you can launch camera within your application and vice versa as well, right? You can open your application from the camera as well, right? Try to understand where is your critical workflow now. As a photography marketplace or a camera related application or the album related application, those will be my critical parts, right? Or maybe banking or finance related applications, the biometric flows, the authentication workflows are tightly knit with the mobile devices, right? So I need to understand where do my core workflows are, how is it getting integrated with the mobile ecosystem on Android APIs, iOS APIs, and try to ensure that I'm able to emulate those flows on set of emulators on set of real devices, right? Trying to ensure that my workflows are working end to end, where my users will be using it, right? And that is how I would try to prioritize and trying to streamline the chaos that happens on the mobile ecosystem, right? That is where I would approach.
Great. Yeah. I mean, that was the perfect answer. I have nothing to add to that.
Awesome. Okay, so now we're all good and sad about how difficult this can be. Why don't we talk about how easy it can be as well? So, Daniel, maybe I'll kick this one over to you. Like, what actionable tactics can teams take to incorporate testing into their mobile development flows to deliver these improvements, to reduce cycle time? Like, how can we turn this around?
Yeah, so I think we mentioned a lot of them already, but to kind of put them into context, I think first comes understanding your problem, right? First comes some kind of measurement of where your problem is. Different teams have different problems, and your testing maturity matters a lot, or your engineering maturity matters a lot. So where you're going to start is going to be different for every team. After you've done that, then you need to go through, okay, what is my testing strategy then, and where do I want to get to? If your cycle time is the biggest issue, then where do I find performance? For example, you can find performance by running your tests in parallel and sharding them. You can find performance by running them on a beefier machine, of course. But also you need a strong foundation where you can scale, because your testing will end up scaling a lot as you grow as a company, as a team. So making that happen when you're able to switch really quickly to a faster machine or a new architecture that you need to test on, that is really important. And then implementing stuff like key value caching or build caching, to avoid tests, to distribute tests, to only test what you can. Again, it's a bit more advanced, but I've seen 80-90% reduction in wall clock time from that one, which is just crazy. Of course, it's not without its challenges itself to get to that point, but when it works really well. And then also kind of choosing your battles, right? As Akhil said, running those builds quickly and iterating, but not running the very expensive, very long tests early on, and building up to that release and trusting that what you're releasing is going to be actually something that is worthwhile putting out there. And that comes with an automated way of distributing your app after the check marks have been there, getting that feedback on, okay, what I need to change then, and then your release process after not being just managed by a spreadsheet where you need to go through steps, because I've seen it a lot, and not mobile developers having to do the actual release manager work of hunting down approvers and marketing to update the release notes and stuff like that, but actually having something more streamlined and automated where you can click a couple of buttons and track what's happening. Oh, it's with the testers. Oh, it's about to be released. Oh, it's in submission. And you can just go through one by one and check all the boxes. So that kind of automation. And very importantly, when something goes wrong, one thing that I also wanted to mention, an interesting tactic that I've seen is teams having basically the previous stable version kind of already up and ready. So if a faulty release gets out, they can really quickly trigger a subsequent release with the stable version. And automation can basically really help here, because with a couple of clicks of a button, you can stop the phased release and get the stable version out there. So from basically commit to production, automation, measurement, and making the right decisions, just as I said, can be your tactic, or should be your tactic at the end of the day. And also adopting this kind of culture and mindset in your teams, that you really take these things seriously. You don't just turn off tests, but actually manage them, and be very deliberate about where to test what, who to involve when. Will all streamline all of those processes. It's good to be diverse, though. It's not a good way to focus in on a very single issue and just focus on that, where you might have a bottleneck somewhere else. Understanding that whole process is pretty much key.
Is there anything that you would add to that, Akhil?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of right practices, Daniel. If the culture and the mindset is set, the goals are set on what we want to achieve, I think on the execution front, much more easier to get it executed. I think that is once the first biggest battle is fought. I think I believe in true CI/CD. At least within BrowserStack, whenever we launch a product, we support a new feature. We ensure that the automation is done right. It works in parallel to where the development happens as well, right? And it stands true for the mobile app development as well, right? You did touch base on the release of mobile is very costly, right? If you have a buggy release, there is no way to roll back. There's always a forward push, right? And it's a biggest or the costliest thing that you could ever do from a release point of view, right? So you need to have a right strategy for your automation, figuring out what test cases needs to be automated, what test cases needs to be run as well, right? You did mention about parallelization, sharding, right? These are the true things that help you with reducing a lot of your build times, right? Because when you start getting into automation, you don't want to go into the cycles of automating everything and then slowing down all of your release cycles, right? Because that's not the first goal we started with, right? So doing it right, picking the right things to automate, that is where I would start pushing for as part of CI/CD automation, right? As part of mobile releases as well, we need to also ensure that it is built going into a continuous form of testing, right? As part of every code commit, as part of every feature development that is being done, right? It gets tested in the continuous manner with the automation in place, and then there are deployment processes as well, right? So less of manual intervention will start helping you streamline or do the releases very efficiently, right? I think that is where we started with the perfect release. But so that is how we should be approaching the overall CI/CD part, the testing part of it as part of your release cycle, right? So,
Awesome, thank you. I just want to be conscious of time here. So we have hit the timeline that we said we would originally hold at 1:45. I think we'll take a couple of questions just because we've had a bunch of really good ones. If your question isn't answered now or all of your questions don't get answered, please keep an eye on our social channels. So we'll try and take these questions and see if we can answer some kind of after the fact. If Akhil and Daniel will be so kind as to share some bonus insights after. So there's one here from Felipe, so it kind of comes back to what you were just saying, Daniel, is how do you slice your test suite for parallel execution? Test plans, device slash OS matrix, tags, question mark.
Sorry, can you repeat it, or can I see that somewhere? Because the train is going.
No problem. So I'm going to just pop this on screen this way.
Perfect.
So this is the question.
Yeah, so there are many different ways of how you can do this, but usually what I've seen is either you use something that, for example, we just released a way for you to automatically shard your tests across different shards for Xcode, and Gradle has some built-in techniques to do that. And then we also provide a way for workflow variants to basically be dynamically created on the fly, so that if you say, I want to have at max 10 shards, then we will create that for you based on your specifications. But there are some other tools out there, most of them open source, as far as I know, that will do that calculation for you. So ideally, what usually happens is you look at all of your tests, your test cases, and you see what the time it is to run them, and then ideally you want to just group them in as many shards as you can afford with your throughput, so that all of them are equal in runtime. Of course, it's going to be pretty impossible to do, to make it bang on equal, but as close as possible, because your longest shard is going to determine your wall clock time at the end of the day.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so we have another question here from Nadeesh. Is there any direct integration tool to access Bitrise builds in BrowserStack?
I think it's more the other way around. So basically, we have an integration with BrowserStack in the form of steps. That's our way of building blocks to build workflows and pipelines. And then you can send your test data, or basically your app to BrowserStack to test it. And then you can view the test results in BrowserStack. I don't think there is like a deeper integration to view the two products at the same time or in the same place, other than kind of manually hacking together something which sends back some test results data to Bitrise. Akhil, anything that you know of that could help here?
No, Daniel, but for something for us to look at, definitely. But the step is the right thing to integrate.
Sounds like a feature request.
Awesome. Okay, we'll go with just one more question and then we'll call it quits, because we want to be respectful of Akhil and Daniel's time. So this one is from Jay Ganesh. It's quite long. How does QA validate a scenario where the product needs to be validated across various browsers and mobile OS versions? For instance, one feature was working fine in Safari X, iOS, iPhone 5, and then it goes on to say basically iPhone 13, lower iOS version, it didn't work. How do large companies validate these scenarios?
Akhil, you want to take this?
Yeah, I think we briefly touch base on this particular topic, right? The iOS releases is very nuanced, and it starts changing with every minor OS version, right? We need to understand what starts affecting your application, and trying to ensure that the latest releases or the latest minor OS versions or beta versions are ensured that are covered as part of your testing cycles. That's the way our users of BrowserStack are also doing it. They are making use of the beta versions or beta releases that we provide on BrowserStack, and ensure that before the app starts hitting the customer's devices, it gets tested so that everything runs fine when the applications reach out to the final users, right? And that's how the companies are doing it. That's how the bigger customers of BrowserStack as well are trying to opt for it. So latest devices trying to understand what is breaking, what is getting linked with the Android and iOS APIs is the right way to go. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you both. Well, thank you both for all of your insights today. Thank you to everyone who has attended and asked a great question. If we didn't get to your question, as I mentioned, please keep an eye on our socials and we'll do our best to try and answer some of these because they're really valuable questions. I wish we'd made this an hour. Awesome. So Akhil, thank you very much. Daniel, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone in the audience, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you, Akhil. Thank you, Jess. And thank you, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Aaron. Bye.
Take care.